Are you interested in understanding GLP-1 medications like Ozempic, Wegovy, or Mounjaro? Then join us on The Plus Sides, Cracking the Obesity Code, the groundbreaking podcast helping people change their lives one episode at a time. The Plus Sides podcast is a disruptor. We're breaking down barriers, smashing stereotypes, and sharing inspiring stories that'll leave you feeling informed and empowered. Join us every week to learn from doctors who are specialists around GLP-1 medications like Ozempic, Wegovy, and Mounjaro. They'll provide you with science and facts to validate these incredible stories. But that's not all. We'll also bring you the voices of the GLP-1 Mounjaro TikTok community, real people who face the challenges of obesity-related diseases and disorders and discovered the incredible plus sides of GLP-1 medications. Our episodes are filled with heartwarming stories, laughter, and moments of triumph. You'll connect with our amazing community members who are reclaiming their health and experiencing their fullest lives. Are you ready to embark on a journey of discovery and empowerment? Tune in to The Plus Sides, Cracking the Obesity Code, and together we'll change the narrative around obesity and end the stigma. Subscribe now on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform and join our incredible community. Let's celebrate the plus sides of life together, because every story deserves to be heard. Every life deserves to shine, and everyone deserves access to expert knowledge and medication. The Plus Sides Podcast. You're not alone. It's not your fault.
Alive on the moon, Jaro, it's on the pen alive, with your host David Knapp.
Thank you, Clap Track, and happy Thursday night. Welcome to On the Pen Live. I am your host, Dave Knapp, man on the Mounjaro. That's why I'm here. You are on the pen. Wegovy, Saxenda, Victoza, Trulicity, Mounjaro, Zepbound, that pen, Emgality. Ever heard of Emgality? If you're on Emgality, you're also on the pen. It's a different kind of pen. My sister sent me this week. This one's kind of fun, right? We'll lead with this. So many people have told me, my sister included, they're like, hey, your pen that you use on your show is just like the pen I use for my migraine medicine. And I thought, well, that's cool. Well, it's not exactly the same. As it turns out, the Emgality pen is much larger than the Mounjaro pen, if you can kind of see that there. Much larger, but very similar style and makeup. This is a once monthly pen, so it's like 1 milliliter. This is 0.5 milliliter. I'm not sure who cares about that, but if you're ever interested in that, that's kind of interesting how similar those pens are. The Emgality one just happens to be a little bit bigger, so they're not exactly the same. But my sister swears by Emgality, says it's been an excellent medication for her migraines. So if you are somebody who suffers from migraines, I really strongly encourage you to check out Emgality. I don't personally know anything about it other than my sister swears by it. So I hope you're doing well. Welcome. It's so good to have you here every week on the Pen Live. We have such a fun time here on the show. Thank you for those who are especially members and support the channel. And that way, if you want to become a member, there's a link in the description of this video. You just click that link. For $2.99 a month, you get access to custom emojis, custom live streams, members-only live streams. We just got off one right before the show, right? If you are a member, put member in the chat and drop some of those custom emojis. Let our friends see those. But we're going to get into the show tonight. We've got a great show for you tonight. We've got Lisa, co-founder of Flex, which is a telehealth disruptor. Absolutely awesome company. She's here to share a little bit about Flex, who I personally use to get my treatment for the care that I am getting through Flex, but also just an amazing program. So we'll get into that tonight. We'll talk about the shortages. We'll talk about some things that you want to talk about. We'll do all that. But if you've been around here for a while, you know that there's sort of a rhythm to this show and what we do here. And we like to start the week off with a little bit of housekeeping. Housekeeping, you want it for pillow? Housekeeping. Great news this week that I can't wait to share with you, right? This week was a big milestone week in the world of OnThePen. Now, this may not seem like a huge milestone for a YouTube channel if you are a big YouTube channel, one of those big giant channels, but we hit 1 million views on YouTube this week. 1 million views. Now, let me tell you, for context, on TikTok, we hit about 2 million views about every 60 days. But on YouTube, you got to scrap for views. You got to scrap for video watches. There's just fewer people over on YouTube, but that is a huge milestone. We hit 1 million views, and I know that in the chat and in especially the membership community, there are so many of you who have contributed to those views. I bet Sue the Dude has got like half of those views. So thank you so much for everyone who has contributed to watching the content, to sharing it. Really, really, really appreciate that. That was a huge personal milestone for me to see. I've been waiting. I tell my wife, I'm like, we're getting close to 1 million. We're getting close to 1 million. We're getting close to 1 million. And on the 14th, we hit 1 million views on YouTube. Another milestone that we hit about 2 weeks ago is we hit number 12 in the United States. Number 12. I just had to wrap my head around this. Number 12 in the United States for medical podcasts. So these charts sort of ebb and flow every day, but 12, like Peter Attia is number 1 on that list. Dr. Paul Saladino is like number 2 or 3 on that list. RFK Jr. was number 10 on the list that week. We hit number 12. So if you haven't checked out the podcast, if you haven't downloaded the podcast, the link is in the description of this video. You can go over it. Basically what it is, it's called the Weekly Dose Podcast. It's designed to be your one-stop shop for incretin mimetic therapy news. So we talk about all things GLP-1 over there, but not just GLP-1. Some of these pipeline drugs like CagriSema, retatrutide. We talk about some of the interesting ones that Roche pharmaceutical company acquired. Really interesting, a GLP-1 GIP co-agonist that dropped top line data today. We'll get into that a little bit later as well. So that's the type of stuff we cover over. It's just a 15-minute podcast. So download that, get your weekly shot of GLP-1 news, no pun intended. Check it out over there. So thank you all for helping contribute in that way. That's the housekeeping for this week. Just some really cool milestones that we hit on OnThePen. And I just want to personally thank each and every one of you who has contributed in some way to getting the content and the information out there. Could not, would not, should not do it without you all. So thank you all very much. We're going to move right along, and we're going to talk about what's fresh in the world of GLP-1s, and we know there's plenty to talk about. So what's fresh in the world of GLP-1s this week? Well, like I said, we got top-line data. So you got to go back and check out. If you're not following OnThePen.com, the website, go over to OnThePen.com /emails. Sign up for email alerts, because then you'll get alerted every time we put a news article up. But about a week ago, we put up an article about Roche Therapeutics, or Roche Pharmaceuticals, who acquired a company called Carmot Therapeutics back at the end of 2023. And in this acquisition, they basically got 3 assets for obesity and diabetes management. One of them is a small molecule pill, very similar to orforglipron, right? But that's in phase 1 trials. But then there was a GIP GLP-1 co-agonist. Where have you heard of that before, right? Tirzepatide. That's what tirzepatide is. It's a GIP drug with a GLP kicker, right? So 5-to-1 is the ratio on this. It's 5 times stronger a GIP receptor agonist than it is a GLP-1. And so basically over at Roche, they have a very similar medication in a once weekly and a once daily injection. So that to me is a really interesting one. But we got some top line data today about the once weekly injection, where after, I better pull this up so I'm actually accurate when I talk about this, but 18% weight loss in 26 or 24 weeks. 18% weight loss. So that is a tremendous, that beats CagriSema, that beats tirzepatide, that beats semaglutide. So that is really encouraging. And I'll be really interested to know, as this sort of progresses, are they adding more GLP-1, which would be my thought, right? Having been on semaglutide before, having been on tirzepatide, I feel like they could dial that GLP-1 up a little bit with tirzepatide, and it would be a little bit stronger in the appetite suppression category. So that was really interesting data that we got from Roche. Go over to OnThePen, though, and read all about the three assets that they have, because, you know, as we've been talking a lot about on this channel, we've been talking about release the vials, right? Release the vials. That's one of the ways that we could get some alleviation of these shortages, because Lord, everybody in this chat is dealing with shortages. And I can't follow the chat as well while I'm doing a show, but I'm sure we've already heard about it in the chat. And so I just think, you know, Eli Lilly has to capitalize on tirzepatide while they can. They have a limited window, even though it seems like it's forever until something else is going to come out, right? But it is a limited window for Eli Lilly to capitalize on tirzepatide, because let me tell you, there are a lot of medications on the heels of tirzepatide that are going to blow tirzepatide out of the water. And so one of those would be potentially this phase 2 candidate from Roche, but we talk a lot about Viking Therapeutics on this channel too, right? Viking Therapeutics has a GLP-1 GIP, also an injectable, and they just keep dialing up the dosages in the phase 2 because very few side effects for these people in these trials for Viking Therapeutics. And they have a pill version of it. So those, to me, the pill versions of these GLP-1s, if they can titrate those up to be as effective as a tirzepatide, that would be absolutely, absolutely amazing. So we'll be super, super interested to follow these companies along as these GLP-1s progress in the pipeline, or these incretin mimetics progress in the pipeline. Cannot wait to see more information like this come along. And we got some more articles in the works at OnThePen, so you'll want to stay tuned. Make sure you go over to onthepen.com, sign up for email alerts. Like, do it right now so you don't forget. That way you get updates every time we drop information about the new stuff in the pipeline. Because if you get as geeked out about this as I do, you'll really appreciate the work we put in over at onthepen.com. But let's take out the trash, because Lord knows there's a lot of trashy news going on in the world of GLP-1s. There's always some information to debunk. So every Thursday night we take out the lots of news to sort of debunk. So one of the things that I thought about sharing with you, I did a video on this earlier this week, was you saw Kelly Clarkson came out, and, you know, the word that everybody uses, admits. And I want to start with that right there. Why is it admits? Why? I mean, there's already a connotation right there, like somebody's doing something that they shouldn't be doing. And what I appreciated about Kelly Clarkson's interview with Whoopi Goldberg, I mean, I'm not going to dwell on this, but what I appreciated about it was she said, hey, I had bad blood work. My doctor was chasing me down for 2 years. I started taking it because I was pre-diabetic, and it was helping me do all this other stuff. And as a side effect, she lost some weight on the medication. Great. But my point is, it's trash that every article that comes out says that Kelly admitted it. And that ticks me off, because this is a medicine that is used to treat disease, to treat people who are metabolically unwell, who are dysregulated hormonally. And so I just think it's bunk, but I think her sharing is a positive. It's a net positive for society to get the conversation out there. So here we are talking about it. You're sharing these videos. We just get to educate more people. So on balance, it's good news. The one thing that I did want to talk about this week was there was an article that came out, and thank you to our podcast producer, Clark Kent, for sending me this information. Shout out to Clark Kent, who has just been so helpful to me, especially over these last few weeks where I haven't had the bandwidth to maybe be everything I want to be as a creator. But Clark Kent, there he is, provided this information for the show. So Ozempic had basically an article come out that says that coming off Ozempic slowly could prevent weight gain. And so this is a study. Now, here's the issue with the study. They had 353 patients in this study, and they used 85 of them in a study of 26 weeks to make some really big extrapolations about maintenance. Now, as you know, maintenance is a lot longer than 26 weeks. Maintenance is life. And so to do such a short study on that, I think is a little bit short-sighted. So I will be personally looking for longer studies on these medications. We know from the Surpass, I believe it was the Surpass trials that showed us that tirzepatide, people who came off tirzepatide pretty well all gained weight to some extent after going off the medication. And so I just think that these articles need to be taken with a grain of salt, and they need to be used in concert with conversations with your doctor about your own personal treatment. But just know that studies like this don't always give the most full and accurate picture about these medications. And especially when it comes to maintenance, which is such a process for people. So we will be looking forward to the next couple of weeks. Hopefully we'll get Michelle back on here. Michelle Hess has been sharing some tips and tricks about maintenance. She being somebody who is in maintenance herself. Those have been super helpful. She's had a few family issues to attend to. I've had my family issues to attend to. And so we've just all trying to just keep things afloat right now, but we'll be eager to have Michelle back in the next couple of weeks to share. Thank you for gifting the memberships to the dude. I think I saw earlier too that we had a super chat from our friend Mimi, who is in the retatrutide trials. If you didn't see Mimi's show, she was on the pen a few weeks ago, sharing about her experience in the retatrutide trials. So thank you for that, Mimi. Thank you for to Sue the Dude. Also, y'all are keeping the lights on here at On the Pen. I appreciate that. So let's not waste too much more time. We've got a great guest tonight. You can catch Lisa on a couple past episodes of On the Pen that we've done over here. Last time we had Lisa on, we talked about shortages and sort of some of the tips and tricks that we can do to navigate those shortages. But definitely want to welcome in. So give her some love. We're going to bring Lisa, but not before we roll the bumper, right? We got to roll the bumper. It's like the funnest one that we have. So we'll roll the hot channel bumper and we'll bring Lisa in just a moment.
Hot channel.
Lisa, welcome back.
Hi, good to be back, Dave. Your bumpers, all of them make me crack up. I just love them.
Well, we have too much fun over here. We need to do some more, like refresh them. But it's good to have you back. I know that this was super last minute, so thank you for being cool about it. Yeah, sure, I'll do it. I think I maybe texted you at like noon my time, so like 10 o'clock this morning for you, maybe. But thanks for being willing to do it.
Yeah, it's good to be back. Thursday, late afternoons for me, it's evenings for you, but are always kind of planned to do either a live or something, so it wasn't really any trouble at all. But congratulations. Yeah, congratulations on the milestones you mentioned. Like, there's so much personality and like, you know, you bring outside like of what I'm always in, like this clinical world, like human, like laughter and entertainment. And the fact that this is just life, you know, this is a part of life, and like your shows, your podcast, everything you do reflects that. So I think it's just a testament, you know, your milestones that you've hit are just a testament to the way you approach it. So huge fan always.
Thank you, Lisa. That's so kind. Yeah, I couldn't do it without all these lovely people that are here in the chat, like these, especially the members, anybody with the little custom emojis next to their name. They have been the ones who, you know, like, because we've shared, because Lisa's been helping coach me through some of the issues that I've had as I've kind of come on and used Flex as my provider for my care. You know, she's no stranger to the fact that I've struggled. And I got to tell you, like, as I've struggled, it's sometimes at some point, it's been very hard to come on here and make content about this stuff, because it's like, you have to remind yourself that it's helping people, right? Even though these medicines, these current medicines as they are not, you know, the maybe the key for me that they are for some other people. Like, it's still important to make the content. It's the members of this channel that like have just kind of picked me up during those like weak moments, and not even just as being members, like the monetary part of it is helpful because it helps to incentivize me to continue. But I'm more like texts, emails, just such a great community over here, which like kind of reminds me. So like, Lisa, you have been very like present and engaged in the TikTok community, right? And so I'm just curious, sort of, I know we didn't talk about talking about this, but we just talked about chatting. So I'm curious what you think. Like, tomorrow is like D-Day for the new community guidelines over on TikTok. So for those of you over here on YouTube, I know that we've got people watching on LinkedIn, we've got people watching on Twitter, we've got people watching on Twitch, but the bulk of the audience is on YouTube. But so for those of you who don't know, TikTok has some new community guidelines that are designed to protect people, to keep people safe. But in any time they do this, there seems to be this algorithmic just spaghetti against the wall. And there's a lot of collateral damage, like a lot of good accounts sharing good information go down with some of those accounts that just shouldn't be on there, right? So what are your kind of thoughts? What are your predictions as D-Day hits at midnight tonight? Do you think that there's a bunch of GLP creators that are just going to be like wiped off of TikTok, or what do you think is going to happen?
My hope, because like you said, this community has been impacted no less than 2 or 3 big major shifts with the bananas and all that. But I think that because this was, there was notices, there was warning. It's kind of not been so abrupt this time around that I hope TikTok has done it right, where they're not going to just completely remove accounts, but more so, I think what they've been talking about is really highly scrutinized individual pieces of content and then take those down. How smart the algorithm is going to be the question here. But my hope is that they won't just be screening for certain hashtags and certain keywords and the content, but if there was a smart way where they've been leading up and preparing for this, that there is a way that with all of their AI available to them, with all of the logic that they've been creating in the algorithm over time, that there's a smart way that they can do at least a pretty decent job delineating between the bad actors and the true education out there. And it's just a few bad actors that kind of is, messed up what was really a good thing on TikTok so far. Like you
Yeah.
probably saw it in the press. Like I get the Google alerts all the time, but there were several articles out just this past week on and it's not just TikTok, it's everywhere, but specifically the articles I read were calling out TikTok for having the ability, advertisements and creators out there, accounts out there touting being able to get your GLP-1s without a prescription. So just things like that I feel like they felt the onus to have to act. And I
Yeah.
just hope they prepared well enough and are not going to wipe out the entire content narrative and content streams out there, because it was pretty great so far. But yeah, all the creators have been talking about different accounts moving over the majority of their activity onto different platforms. So it's not going anywhere. It's just moving, hopefully temporarily. Right.
Right.
How about yourself? What's your prediction?
Well, I mean, I'll just kind of dovetail off what you're saying, because I kind of just I agree with everything you said. I got really frustrated when they first announced this. It's like they announced that they were going to change the community guidelines, and the announcement came in at the same time that the announcement came that the algorithm was going to change, or not the algorithm, the guidelines were going to change. My account started getting completely throttled. I couldn't post. I mean, I'm not alone. There was many people. But it was like right at the peak of the Release the Vials campaign. So my content was like hot. And so everything was going at that time. So it was a really frustrating time to lose that momentum, not only for my content's sake, but just for the whole movement of the Release the Vials. It was getting press. I was on news programs, and it was getting the attention that it needs. But in the middle of all this, so I'm like scrolling through TikTok, GLP TikTok one day in the middle of all this, and I literally pull up this video, and this girl is like, so we just got in my new stash of retatrutide. Just go to the link in my bio and you can get the retatrutide. It's, it's like, I was just ready to throw my phone through a wall, because I'm like, how can she make a video that I'm seeing in the FYP that is hawking research grade, like dangerous stuff, right? Like even if the peptide is like legit, it's retatrutide. It's a glucagon agonist. You don't know how people are going to respond to that cardiovascularly. You don't know how they're going to dose themselves. I mean, it's the wild, wild west. And I was like, how is this happening? I'm like, she's just like, yeah, I mean, and she's just selling it out of her kitchen. She's like, I just got these in my fridge, and she's got like her label on it. It's like, Betsy's retatrutide. My mind was blown. So I do agree. Like I think something has to be done to deal with that, right? Because somebody's going to get hurt from that, and it's going to give the whole thing a bad name, especially compounds. Like compounds have been a great, like I started off very skeptical of compounds because some compounds that people call compounds are nothing more than research grade, but some of them come from very reputable sources, and in some cases the same sources as the manufacturer's medication. So, I think that, I've warmed to, and I understand, inherently the importance of compound pharmacies in our healthcare system. And so, I just feel like that's going to give the whole thing a bum name. So I'm glad TikTok's doing something. I'm actually confident also that their algorithm is going to be tuned in enough to know like who's out there doing stuff that could be construed as sketchy, and who, I'm just confident that that'll get ironed out. Maybe not at first. There might be some collateral damage, but like there already has been, and there always is every time they shift anything. So hopefully it comes back. If not, though, it's just a plug. Like this TikTok, the TikTok community is bigger, but it's better over here.
You always say that. Yeah.
Yeah. So like come on over to OnThePen on YouTube. Like we've got just a great group of people over here. So that's my plug. If you're watching here for the first time, hit that like, hit that bell, hit that sub so you can stay around. We do this every week on Thursday nights. So we'll get into a little bit more of the kind of last time you were here. We talked about accessibility to the medication. We talked about how people were struggling and what are some of the things that they can do. Like, what are you seeing now just from the patient perspective? Like what is the biggest issue still accessibility because of shortages, and how has the landscape changed since we talked last time?
A couple of things that I'm seeing, and not necessarily recent as of the last month, but the last at least couple months, is the craziness of the insurance adjudication process. Okay, so we help folks who want to see if they can be covered. The medications can be covered with their insurance. And then, of course, if not, or they're not insured and they want to just go off initially with the compound route, we help them that way as well. But when we do go through the insurance adjudication process, last year around this time, it was still difficult, but I never would have predicted the craziness that we hear back from insurers now. So we all know, most of us know, you need a type 2 diabetes mellitus diagnosis for Mounjaro or Ozempic. That hasn't changed. But for the weight reduction versions, so Zepbound and Wegovy specifically, to do the prior authorization for that, you always needed to showcase a BMI of 30 and above, perhaps 6 months of step therapy, behavior change programs, those kind of things. Well, now what we're hearing from those same companies, same insurers, reputable, large, nationwide, and it doesn't really matter what kind of plan. But now we're seeing, they need to see a 40 plus BMI, which just the first time I heard that, it made me angry, because I'm like, how as a health insurer are you saying we need to come back when the FDA indication is for 30 BMI, that you require a 40 BMI before you will cover this? And that's not the only requirement, but they needed to see that as a bare minimum. At that point, you are asking them to come back when they have potentially type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, a whole host, osteoarthritis, a whole host of other issues that they're dealing with before you consider covering them. So I thought that was, like, in my mind, criminal. Now we're seeing a lot of this, there's always been red tape, and it's just more red tape and different ways to mask the red tape. Now we see things like, more types of blood work and lab work. So obviously, they're going to be looking at comorbidities that you put in a prior authorization as the reason for medical necessity. Now they're getting more stringent, and they're asking for deeper, broader, more in-depth hormone labs to show that hormones aren't a reason for the weight gain. And if it is, so what? So it's still a medical necessity, right? But they won't approve it with certain reasons, certain comorbidities that would classify someone as obese, or just overweight with that comorbidity. So just more things that I don't feel are ways that they should deny or disprove medical necessity for these obesity management medications, that I'm flabbergasted at on the daily when we deal with these things. So that's something that's always been an issue for access, but now I think just getting ludicrous. And then, of course, the shortage. It's not been an issue, but it's definitely gone. You guys all know this, if you're sort of already part of the community or on one of the medications, but 6 to 12 months ago, it was very much the semaglutide that was in the shortage, and you could more easily get the tirzepatide brand medications, right? I feel like it's swapped now. Semaglutide I can find, like Wegovy, Ozempic, no problem. And then for 5 months or so, it's been definitely the Zepbound Mounjaro. And it's so interesting. I feel like as the popularity has grown, or the demand and just the awareness around this has grown over the past, let's say, 24 months, you see these waves, because you see, you can say, let's say 6 to 9 months ago, there must have been a huge number of people who were starting to get these prescriptions because the doses and the shortages kind of move like this wave, right? It's the smaller dosages, and then that group of people move to the mid-level dosages, then that's in shortage, and then you can find them on the outskirts of the lower high dosages, and then it moves to the higher dosages. So it's just this constant wave. And so what I try to do is kind of keep up with where our patient pool is in their journey, and kind of just try and forecast where our wave is going amongst a broader wave in the nation. So that's a lot I just said, but it's kind of the way that we deal with it. And then we ask our pharmacy partners, 3 months from now, please order more of this dose, because that's where our patient pool is going. So it's been a lot of it.
Yeah. So you're doing sort of some predictive ordering based upon where your patient population is. That's smart. I'm curious, maybe you feel comfortable answering this and maybe not. So feel free to just say you're not comfortable, but do you notice that with the absurdity of the PBMs, is there a worse offender than others, or are there any that stick out? It's really bad with this company, or is it just across the board? They're just all playing shenanigans.
Oh, I'm not afraid to say which come to mind right now. And these are ones that in any other context, I would say are probably a couple of the best, a couple of the most reputable, a couple of the, people's preference in terms of a PBM and insurer. But like Blue Cross Blue Shield, those have been the biggest offenders for me recently. And it's my world of my, patient pool, not in general, but they've been the ones where I expected more, just as a bigger organization with more,
Emmy brings up a good point. I've heard this from many people, that their insurance is requiring them to step up. They're only going to cover 1 month at a certain dose. Are you seeing that as well?
Oh, yes. Actually, within the last maybe 3 or 4 months too, approval of 60 days. And what is going to happen in 60 days? Do you read the data? Majority of people see the impact closer to at least 3 months. And clinically, our providers tell the patients, yes, there are this many % of non-responders. And typically it takes, from a clinical data perspective, the majority of people see the impact, noticeable weight loss in the 3rd month, right? Or after 12 weeks. So, nothing's happening for the most part in the first 60 days. You do see the fringe cases where it's I lost 12 pounds on month 1 starter dose. Wow, more power to you. But mostly that's inflammation coming down and water weight coming down. That's not true, weight and BMI and all of the other benefits that you expect to see. But just 60 days. And it's not to say, file for reauthorization in 60 days. We'll cover in 60 days, and you have to appeal for them to, of course, and you can, they tell you that up front, you can appeal for a longer therapy. But why go through that? You can't even really prove anything, whether that person is really seeing positive impact. So that's a reason for them to stay on course, or it isn't working. And so they should stop. Either way, 60 days is nothing, at least 90. I mean, I can see the rationale for 90, but 60 is just you just want to throw more red tape out there is how I see it.
Yeah, there's a lot of stall tactics. If there's anything that I've learned, in not necessarily on the GLP-1 side, but with my wife and her RA and trying to keep her on the medicine she's been on forever, if there's anything I've learned, they're really good at stalling. And they have a lot of systems and processes built in to just stall on your fill. Even if they're ultimately going to fill it, how much money do they save by putting you through a 2-month, juggling act of trying to get your doctor in alignment with them and everything. And so they're just really good at stalling. And I think about how the Change Healthcare hack, how much that hack benefited Optum, because like how often the pharmacies were footing the bills for the medications, and the reimbursement is sucked, and like, stuff couldn't go through, PAs couldn't go through, all that stuff. And like, that's a little ironic, but anyway, that's a whole other topic. But yeah, it's the insurance side of this. I mean, even if the supply was ironed out, you still have this giant elephant in the room with the PBMs. And we need PBM reform so badly in this country.
Yeah.
And so much of our healthcare system has become, controlled by just a small number of companies, and that's just dangerous. And it was highlighted with the Change Healthcare Act. 1 in 4 Americans lost a tremendous amount of personal data, and how many people were affected by not being able to fill their scripts during that time. So even if they got all this ironed out, we still have a mess here to deal with in the healthcare system. I want to sort of shift the conversation so we know that accessibility continues to be an issue. You kind of touched on one of the things that you guys are doing with your predictive ordering. What are some of the things that Flex is implementing or doing to try to sort of, you're not going to fix this issue, just one telehealth company, but what are some of the things that you're uniquely doing to try to mitigate these issues for your patients?
Yeah. So when we decided to release a compound alternative, semaglutide compound specifically, we didn't want to do this by saying, here's a lesser quality, more risky alternative. So it really took a lot of, I guess, thoughtful, deep dive research from our sourcing team on finding a really great quality semaglutide compound from a very reputable manufacturer. So I feel really proud and confident every time I talk about the compound to our patients. And when I talk to them about it and how it's different and why we decided after a year of not prescribing any compounds, why we decided on this particular source. And so that's one thing that I feel like we're doing. Whereas every med spa out there and a lot of sort of online only, I'll call it telehealth providers, they just take whatever's lowest cost, whatever is driving the best profit for them. And then the other thing I think from a cost perspective, going back to more of the PBM and insurance conversation, is payment programs. Whether it's a patient who was on the brand medication and they kind of feel more comfortable staying on that, but their insurance situation has changed. Maybe they changed employers, so they're no longer covered through their new insurance plan, or it just stopped covering. That happens altogether without any change on their plan or their PBM. Being able to help them with an affordable payment plan to stay on that. But payment plans, whether they decide to go the brand route or the compound route, just make the out-of-pocket easier to help people get on the medication, start seeing the benefits, and without the cost having to be as big of a factor. So we have Flex Pay, we have Flex Finance. Our internal mantra is we never want to turn any patient away for the sole reason of cost. And if that's the case, we need to do a better job of figuring out other solutions for them. So we have a payment plan that I think is unique, like none other. It's like none other really out there. So that's also something that I feel like we've started and we're not stopping. We're continuing to evolve the payment programs for everyone.
Awesome. Yeah, this I can just say from, the advocacy side, I'm on branded Mounjaro, and I have not really, we had a little bit of a hiccup when I first was switching back from Ozempic to Mounjaro. That was a little bit more on the insurance side, but now that I've been on Mounjaro, I haven't missed a dose. And so I have been very appreciative of the work that you all have done on your side to run those down and make sure that I wasn't without. So I really, really appreciate that. It's an interesting conversation. The compound conversation is a tricky one, because I think, everybody would prefer to be on the branded version of these medications, right? It's just not, there. And I would be less sympathetic to it if I felt like the pharmaceutical companies were doing everything in their power to bring different presentations to market, but they're not even addressing it. In the last Eli Lilly earnings call, there was zero talk of release the vials. Everybody was talking about it. Everybody who is on these medications online is talking about release the vials. Everybody. We just wanted to hear something. We want to hear anything. Like, we have plans to do this, or we're not. I mean, the most we heard is we have all options on the table, right? That was the most we heard out of that earnings call, but nothing. There's no bone to the community. Nothing of like, hey, it was just the same old, same old. We got our plants in North Carolina coming online. We've made investments in purchasing these other companies that aren't even going to contribute to the supply for another couple of years. And while I appreciate their efforts, applaud their efforts, and I know that they're moving mountains to increase manufacturing capacity, there's just other things that they could do in the way of, new presentations of these medications to help with the supply. So yeah, it's frustrating. So there has to be other things that they can do. I'm going to just catch up real quick in the chat. Peter mentioned that his wife passed away in 2022. I'm not really keeping up with the chat. I just see that. And I just want to say, Peter, that my thoughts and prayers are with you. That is brutal. I cannot imagine losing my wife. She broke her leg, and we've just seen less of her because she can't get around. And that's been bad enough for our family. So thoughts and prayers to you. Peter is talking about how he is on this medication and it's helping to keep him healthy for his kids who are relying on him now that their mom is gone. So thoughts and prayers to you, Peter. Thanks for sharing that in the chat tonight. We appreciate you being here. So Lisa, I think that this conversation about accessibility is only going to continue to grow. Do you see personally, just in your own opinion, do you see different presentations of branded medication, GLP-1 medications coming to market anytime soon? Do you see that as a possibility?
I do. I think, we talked about it a little bit, but I think it's imminent. I think it might not have been in the last earnings, but I'm hopeful that Eli Lilly will mention it, if not give us something more substantive in the next quarterly earnings announcement and call. I think it's imminent. Like, we start seeing, the new NDCs that we can assume are the single dose files. If not, I think I saw a post from you, perhaps. I saw it somewhere. But we know that it's imminent.
Yeah.
I don't know that, so it's going to come out, it's going to be released. How fast and how long and how much that impacts and improves the shortage situation is the thing that I think is really to be calculated. With both, whether it's Novo, Eli, anyone else, constantly doing these trials on new indications that are going to be improved, and then opening up this medication to be approved to so many other people with different conditions, it's always going to be in very high demand, if not more so. So even if they release that, how much can they keep up with that new form factor, if you will, that new, in the vials? I think that in a month you can, from a manufacturing standpoint, in a 503B capacity, you can manufacture 1 million vials in a month, right? So hopefully that will definitely, release some of that pressure for Eli Lilly's demand. But again, as more indications are approved and they're going to be, prescribed and approved and covered, are we going to see this with the shortage, right? Like, so it'll go down for a while and then up again and down for a while. But I just think also, so say that comes out, perhaps, let's say Q3 this year, just a total guess, not from any kind of insight. Hopefully it comes out by the end of the year. And then in the next couple of years, we know that some of these other, you mentioned a lot of these prior to me coming on, but a lot of these other medications being, getting to the later stage clinical trials, being released publicly, more mass, more competition, more availability, more options is always going to be great for patients. We saw Novo announce a couple of times price reductions. So I think we're headed for the right sort of turn here. Let's give it the next 12 to 24 months, which seems long now. But Dave, when you and I started on this and kind of started talking about it as creators, that was like wasn't that like 24 months ago, I want to say, or if not very close. So it does go by pretty quickly. And I think, let's mark this point in time, like 24 months from now, let's kind of revisit this conversation and be really interesting to see how much affordability and access has improved, just again, with price points coming down, with files coming out, and with more options out there now to patients.
Yeah, I am 100% with you on that. I expected the vials to be talked about on this earnings call. They weren't. They were sort of indirectly. I mean, but I kind of feel like it'll be between now and the next earnings call. I feel like we'll hear something somewhere, just in whether it's at, I can't remember what the timeline is for Obesity Week, but I feel like it's somewhere. They're going to get the question and they're going to have to address it. I was shocked that they didn't get the question from one of the investment firms that was allowed to ask the questions on those earnings call. But yeah, and you make a good point. It's not that if they release single dose vials, if and when they release single dose vials, it's not going to fix this. They're still they're all options on the table, remark on the earnings call, and they're increasing their revenue projections by $2 billion. Even with all that, they said basically the shortages aren't going to be resolved until orforglipron comes out, and that's 2026. So for all of you wondering when these shortages are going to get better, when we're not going to have to be so scrappy, it's probably 2026. And it's not even going to be right away in 2026 that we'll see orforglipron. It's going to have to permeate the market before it actually makes an impact as well. So, but hopefully by that time, you'll see many people on maintenance on orforglipron. Maybe those folks who are moving to maintenance or considering maintenance will move over to something like orforglipron. And then beyond that, you've got CagriSema, but still that's Novo Nordisk. And CagriSema, interestingly, what we've learned about CagriSema is it's a dual chambered pen. So whereas tirzepatide is one molecule acting on 3 receptors, CagriSema is semaglutide and another drug, caglarintide, and its pen has to have 2 separate chambers for the medication. So you're talking about another Frankenstein pen that's going to have to deliver CagriSema. So like that's not very encouraging. And so that's why at the top of this, the sleeper medications that I am getting most excited about are medicines like orforglipron or high dose Rybelsus that we'll see hopefully by the second half of this year, 50 milligrams of Rybelsus. I'm getting excited for the fact that Viking Therapeutics could come out with their GLP-1 GIP. And I wouldn't be surprised based upon what they've said, because they've got a GLP GIP pen and pill. And I think that based upon what they've been asked about, how are they going to bring it to market with the pen and the shortages and everything, they're like, well, we think enough capacity exists to do it. Like, no, it doesn't. If it did, they'd be doing it now. Novo and Lilly, they have all the money in the world to buy up all the capacity. It just doesn't exist. So they're not just going to be able to pull it out of thin air. That's why I think that maybe low key they'll bring the pill to market. And if they brought a GLP GIP pill to market in, let's say, 2028, however far off this is, that would be an absolute game changer, because then you're talking about the potential for, tirzepatide, Zepbound level weight reduction, obesity control in a pill. And it's just no cold storage, so much easier to manufacture. It makes you think. I think one of the things that people forget about with these medications is the cold storage part of it. It's not just the pens and the manufacturing, but the distribution. It has to be shipped cold. It has to be stored at the warehouses for the distributors cold. It has to be moved cold to the pharmacies and have to be kept cold at the pharmacies. Which leads me to another sort of like, I'm curious what your thoughts are. This is just sort of a random thought. Thank you for the super chat, Rudy. Also, Sue the Dude wanted me to mention to you that you look very nice and healthy. He didn't say that about me. He said that about you, Lisa. So take that for what it is. Okay. So have you heard, so you create a ton of content and you're on live with people all the time. How many times have you heard people say, I think I got like a placebo box? I don't think that my pens are working. Have you heard that?
Not placebo box, but no matter how many times I tell a patient, like a broken record, to the point where I think I'm being offensively redundant. they still will come back and say after 30 days, I haven't lost weight yet. Like, I've only lost 4 pounds. What's going on? Is this not right for me? Is it not working on me? I'm so hope. Oops, sorry. I don't have hope. I'm losing hope. It's been 4 weeks. And I'm like, it's okay. Let's start it out. Just the spiel that I feel like a broken record. I could say the spiel in my sleep backwards and forwards and upside down because I say it so much. And so just that, like, people lose hope so quick on it. And I get it. They've worked years and decades and on different things, outside GLP-1, outside of pharmacological support, but so many things that they've given their all to, and it's failed. So a month is a long time when you're anxiously awaiting these life-changing, promising results, right? So that's what I hear about. Not so much like placebo. I guess it's one and the same, but just
Yeah.
it's hard to be patient in the beginning because you're so excited, you're so hopeful, you have you're hearing constantly people's success stories, whether it's in the media, from your friends and family, on shows like this. And so no matter how many times I say, let's give it at least 3 months before we even determine efficacy in any one thing, whether it's your nutrition, whether it's your physical activity, or whether it's the medication. Like, we'll look at it all, but like, don't make any kind of assumptions around efficacy for you until at least 3 months. But doesn't matter. 75% of people after the first month will come back with a little bit of dismay. I think that's half our job, honestly, as a care team, to not let them lose hope, to continue to encourage them. Those are the kind of the outlier support things that we don't really think about. But in my day to day, it's a lot of what I do and talk about. But why do you bring that up? Like, what are you
Yeah.
seeing and hearing about?
I bring it up because I've heard it over and over, and I certainly hear the same things that you do. Like, I just finished my first month on 2.5 and I didn't lose anything, those types of things. So here's a little theory that I have. Thank you so much, Peter. I really appreciate that super chat, and I'm glad that you're here. So glad that you're here, buddy. So I heard it enough times to be like, I wonder, right? So what they say about peptides is that peptides are very unstable molecules, very hard to keep stable. And I think about the transit of these things, and I just kind of laid out, like, from place to place to place, where you have to keep this temperature controlled, right? And I just wonder, there's no real good way to tell and I thought about this when I got the mail order stuff from CVS. When I first started Mounjaro, I was actually getting them from Amazon Pharmacy, and I was getting them in the middle of winter. And like, it would not fail. When I would order, there would be this massive, like, ungodly snowstorm that would keep the medicine from getting to me for like 10 days, where it was sitting on a tarmac in Chicago where it was negative 30 degrees out. And it's like, okay, so they've probably kept the medicine cold, but how have they kept it from freezing when it's that cold? Right. So all these things I start to think, okay, if the peptides are that sort of like volatile and break down that easily, these things are flying on airplanes and they're riding along in the back of a UPS car. Like, could there be something to how the medication is handled before it gets to you? I think especially with the mail order, that could affect the efficacy of the dose that you're taking. And so for some of these people, certainly not the people who are like, I haven't lost any weight this month. But for some people who've maybe been on the medication for a while and they take their first shot from a box of 15 and they just said, this is not doing anything for me. Do you think there could be anything to that, or is it in my head, do you think?
It's interesting. I have not really thought, when I think about temperature control, I always think about getting too warm, not too cold and near freezing. So it's interesting you bring that up. But going this route, the concern about it having gotten too warm and not being in a refrigerated, with cold packs and things like that. Like, you and I have talked about it before too. And my pharmacists are always reminding me, it can go 21 days without refrigeration. Like, don't forget that. I'm like, okay, yeah, you're right. So the fact that it was in 3 days in transit and wasn't cold when it was received, get it. And they usually, a lot of pharmacies, not all, and it's okay that not all, but a lot of them kind of include, when they do include the cold ship, like a temperature monitor, just to make sure it hadn't exceeded a certain temperature. But the cold going the other direction, like having gotten too cold, and the efficacy of that, I've actually not thought of, or like not dealt with personally. But that's interesting. I mean, let's see, we're coming into summer months, so it won't be an issue for quite some time. But I suppose I haven't looked into it. But the little one, I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. A lot
Yeah.
of temperature control medications come with that little monitor. I wonder if that goes the other way as well. Typically, that's again to not exceed a certain temp, but that's certainly one easy way. But the efficacy, I don't know. I would have thought perhaps the if it did get too cold, that's definitely a possibility, right? There are temperature ranges from the manufacturer for a reason. So if it did get beyond that point to a freezing temperature, that's absolutely a reason why the efficacy could have been lulled to avoid in that particular
Yeah.
month. Yeah.
Yeah. My mind just wanders. I almost wonder if they could come up with, you remember back in the day on like pop cans and beer cans, they had like the little temperature
Yes.
gauge on them. Like there'd be
That's
some
correct.
sort of way to put something on the side of these pens where if it got too cold or if it got too hot, then something gets triggered and there'd be like a red line on it or something that you could be like, oh, this was time temperature abused. I feel like they owe it to us to have something on these. It's $1,000 box of medication that is getting to people. Even if you're getting it from your pharmacy, it's exchanged hands, custody multiple times, to whereas I want some level of confidence that my prized little possession here was cared for. And I come from the food industry, so
Yeah.
like it's stringent there, right? The food quality, the temperature, the cold storing, the hot storing, all of that is like meticulous. I just want a way to see, and I think it'd be super easy for them to do. I just would have peace of mind every month that I could go, okay, this was taken care of from the time it left the
Yeah.
factory, from the time it got to me. I don't see a red line. This is good to go. So anyway, that's my pitch on that. I think there could be something to it because the chains of amino acids are very, very delicate. And so I would think that especially freezing would screw it up. Heat, I don't know, maybe. But anyways,
Yeah.
interesting thing to
Good
ponder.
point.
Well, well, is there anything else that you like to say tonight? Like if you want to direct people to where they can find more information about Flex, where they can follow you on the socials, all those things, I'm sure many people who have been here are used to you being here and probably already know, but for those who haven't.
Yeah. So if you want to check out how Flex works, the type of care we provide, you can go to flexnow.care. We actually revamped the website and it's also joinflex.care, but flexnow.care also redirects there. And then our handle across all platforms, we also just recently updated to Join Flex now, just to kind of match the web presence. So if you're interested, if you want just sort of a commitment, cost-free consultation, because you have some questions, whether you're new to the GLP-1 potential therapy for yourself, or you've been on it and you just aren't getting some of the answers from your current provider, we're happy to always just impart any education that we can. So there's no harm in kind of scheduling a consultation with us, whether it's on the insurance side or separately, just a general consultation. So you can check that out at joinflex.care.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here tonight, Lisa. I really appreciate all the wisdom that you can share with us. You're on the front lines of this, fighting these battles every day for everybody. Certainly, on a personal level, appreciate the battles you fought for me with insurance and tracking down medication, and I just appreciate not having to worry about it. So, thank you so much for that, and I really appreciate you being here.
Always my pleasure. Thanks, Dave.
All right, Lisa, have a good night.
Good night.
Lisa Fujioka from Flex, co-founder of Flex. Again, you get the call outs there. You can see on the screen where you can find them. I think she said joinflex.care also, but at joinflex now all over the socials. Make sure that you go and give them a follow. Such a great gesture for her to come here at the last minute. I didn't have anything lined up. I haven't had the ability to line anything up all week, the last week and a half. If any of you know, my wife broke her leg not 2 Saturdays ago, and so it's been like a lot of just parenting on my own. We have 4 kids, 10 and under, and my days started about 5:30 a.m. and they ended about 11 o'clock at night, and so it just is super super tired. Sue the Dude, thank you for boosting the ego. I do appreciate that. As Dink reminded us, welcome, Dink. I hope you're doing well. I know you've been here the whole show, but hi. Thank you all for being here. Make sure you hit that like, hit that bell, hit that sub. If you're somebody who is new here, make sure you subscribe. There's many ways that you can find us, but it would be so great if you would go download the podcast, give it a 5-star rating and review. It is my goal to see that podcast hit the top 10. I think we can do it. We hit 12. That was sort of at the peak of the Release the Vials. So we had a lot of momentum going there. But if you wouldn't mind going over to the podcast, giving it a 5-star rating review, it's called On the Pen, the Weekly Dose. You'll know it because actually you probably just go to the Google machine, hit On the Pen, the Weekly Dose podcast. But you will notice it because this is what it looks like here. Let's see.
Welcome to the week.
So that's what it looks like. Make sure you go give it a 5-star rating and review. Would really appreciate it. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate each and every one of you giving time to the stream every week, giving time to the work that we do here on the pen. It is a lot of work, but it is so worth it. And I'm so thankful for the platform that you all have given me and the community that you all provide by virtue of being here, sharing, and just being along for the ride. So thank you. I hope that you all have a great week. Thank you for the super chats tonight. The gifts, so appreciated, especially as my wife missed some work this past couple weeks. This really helps. So thank you for those who are members and those who give gifts and give back in that way. But for all of you, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May he cause his face to shine upon you and be so, so gracious to you this week. Thank you for being here. Until next week, we will see you on the pen.